Hello everyone, you're very welcome to this webinar, and in today's session we will examine the assessment and moderation of the Synoptic project in the subject area of health and fitness. Firstly though, a few introductions to put a name to a voice. My name is Kelly Johnson and I'm a Provider Development Officer here at NCFE. My background is vocational education and I have 15 years of experience of working in the FE sector in various roles including a teacher, a curriculum leader and a curriculum operations manager. I specialise mainly in the subjects of sport, health and fitness, and I've educated young people from level 1 to foundation degree level, including A-levels. My role here at NCFE is to support centres through the planning, onboarding and further CPD opportunities for the NCFE qualifications, but in particular the VCERT qualifications, and this is with a focus on promoting and advancing learning. I'm also really pleased today to be joined by Phil Tolman, who is the lead external quality assurer for sport and travel. Phil has been a sport EQA at NCFE for 20 years and a lead EQA since 2017. He is very passionate about supporting centres and ensuring that learners achieve the best possible outcomes. The plan for this webinar is to firstly provide you with a brief summary of our approach to awarding for this academic session. Phil will then provide an overview of the structure and delivery of the Synoptic project tasks for health and fitness for this session. It will provide information on marking, grading, and giving feedback to your learners. We will also be detailing the internal quality assurance or the IQA process and the documentation that you can use, including the grading calculator, as well as resubmissions and submitting your grades to the portal. Lastly, there will be information provided on the EQA support that is available to you and your centres, including the documentation and the process for EQA reviews and expectations, as well as the certification process. So let me begin then with a brief overview of our approach to awarding for this academic session. We have updated our assessment variation process to allow centres to use additional test centre locations. We've adapted our assessments so they can be delivered in line with public health guidelines. All relevant content must still be delivered and the assessment criteria met. To further support centres, significant adaptations have been made to the conditions of the Synoptic project for this year. So what have we done? We have adapted the delivery and completion conditions so that it can now be completed by learners remotely where required. We have removed the requirement to complete it within a set number of hours. We have also removed the requirement for it to be completed under controlled conditions. And we have also brought forward the release of the Synoptic project brief so that centres can plan their own delivery timescales around their own delivery plan. So for this year, it was released on November the 1st, 2021. And just to note that learners do need to be registered and booked onto the controlled assessment so that it can be viewed and accessed. Furthermore, we've also removed the timescales around the submission deadlines, but there is a deadline for having the final grades onto the portal, and this deadline is the 27th of May 2022. Learners will still be able to have a resubmission opportunity, but this is to be managed internally by the centre. Learners should have the opportunity to undertake 2 submissions, so a first submission and a resubmission if applicable, but it's only the final grade or the resubmission grade that should be entered onto the portal. Grades for a learner's first submission do not need to be entered onto the portal, but assessment records should be kept up to date to provide a full audit trail of the resubmission. And the EQA review deadline is to be conducted before the 31st of July 2022 to allow for results to be confirmed by the end of July for performance tables. I'm now going to pass to Phil, who's going to provide you with an overview of the structure and delivery of the Synoptic project brief task this year.
We are now going to look at the delivery and the structure of this year's Synoptic project. I would recommend that the first part of doing this is that you make sure that you visit the NCFE QualHub website and download our documentation. The 2 documents that appear on the slide are the assessor feedback to learner form and the declaration of authenticity. Also, the learner log, which is a key element of the Synoptic project. The learner must complete this every time they work on the project to track their progress. This will support the learner to achieve AO5, manage and evaluate the project. This year's project, the 21-22, is scenario-based, and it's based on the learner working in the gym as an apprentice fitness instructor, and they are asked to prepare a program for one of the current clients to improve their CV endurance and agility. The key points that need to be considered are methods to improve. Learners show how they understand what is meant by these and demonstrate how they would apply the principles of specificity, progression to a client's health and fitness program. Learners also need to be able to explain how CV endurance and agility should be improved. They need to refer to different methods of training and the principles of fit. Learners also need to create, administer, and analyse a lifestyle questionnaire to suggest ways of improving clients' lifestyle. They also need to administer and analyse the results of a PARQ to evaluate how ready their client is ready to perform health and fitness activities. The PARQ could be one that they've been given or one that they have been sourced. And we'll come up to some ideas of where they might be able to source later in the presentation. Current levels of fitness should be assessed, and learners should explore the different ways that CV and agility can be tested. They should carry out at least one test, but with their selected client, and record the results of both tests. So just to refer, so that's one test for each, one just for CV and one for agility. They need to create a 4-week health and fitness program, explaining the choices that they've provided for their client. Progress with the client should take place at the end of week 2, with changes made to week 3 and 4 based on the review with their client. Any changes should be clearly explained. All these areas and the way that a learner addresses them should be covered as part of the teaching before the project is distributed to learners. So most of you are listening to this webinar should be at that stage now, but the idea is that you use your teaching to prepare the learners to complete all of the above that we discussed. Remember that the Synoptic project should only be given to learners who have completed all learning. The unit contents for 1 and 2 must be covered before this is given to learner. The Synoptic project brief details the mandatory sections which must be included in the project. I will provide you here with an overview of the expected content of each session. So, cardiovascular endurance and agility. Cardiovascular endurance is the ability to exercise for extended periods of time without tiring. This can be at a moderate or high intensity, and this is dependent on the efficiency of the heart and blood vessels and their ability to deliver oxygen to working muscles. Regular aerobic exercise, where the body is working continuously at a steady rate, e.g. running, cycling, swimming, will help improve the cardiovascular system by strengthening the heart and blood vessels, increasing their ability to pump oxygen around the body and remove waste. Learners should explain cardiovascular endurance and agility and how it can be improved by increasing the number of times you train and the types of exercise in a session. For example, instead of training twice weekly, you could increase this to 3 to 5 times per week, and this would ensure progression in both components of fitness. They need to refer to different methods of training and the principles of fit. That's frequency, intensity, time, and type of exercise. Learners should be encouraged to link their responses to different forms of exercise and sport. It would be beneficial if learners would devise their own lifestyle questionnaire. To help this, there are links on the slide to enable their examples, to access some examples of these type of forms. The design and completion should enable the learner to analyse if their clients take part in physical activity and to what extent. Different fitness tests that could be used to check cardiovascular endurance and agility include cardiovascular fitness can be tested through a variety of tests, including bleep test, 1.5 mile run, and Cooper test. Learners should identify the test that they are going to use. The main fitness test used to test agility is the Illinois agility test. This is a short test that can be used to test an individual's ability to change direction quickly. When learners are assessing their clients' results, they need to be able to use normative data to support the results, and this will enable them to identify and analyse fitness test scores against national standards. For the 4-week health and fitness plans, learners should include in their plan a warm-up and cool-down, and the key components of the main activity session. Consideration should be given to the completed PRQ and lifestyle questionnaires when devising these fitness plans. The programme could also include some lifestyle changes. Session cards could be used so that the learner knows what to do in each exercise. A progress review should be conducted at week 2 with evidence made of changes to weeks 3 and 4. Over the next few slides, I'm going to talk you through the marking and grading of the Synoptic project. The slide now I shows the 5 assessment objectives. When it comes to assessing the Synoptic project, this should be done holistically. The Synoptic project accounts for 60% of the final grade. You'll be judging the project as a whole, and you'll be assessed against each of the objectives on the slide. I said at the start, there are 5 assessment objectives for this project, and the 5 detailed on this side. I'm going to provide you more detail about each one. Each assessment objective has different weighting. The band awarded for each AO will form the overall grade awarded for the Synoptic project. This will be the grade that you will enter onto the portal. We will show you how to calculate the final grade later in this presentation. Marking and assessment of the Synoptic project can only take place when the learner has completed the project and submitted their complete project. Remember, for this session, learners have the opportunity to make 2 submissions. The first submission must be received, marked, and assessed and sampled by the internal quality assurer at your centre before this can be returned to the learner. The learner will then have the opportunity to resubmit their second and final submission. The opportunity to resubmit should be offered to learners who have not achieved an assessment objective or wish to have the opportunity to improve the grade. Resubmissions will need to be assessed, graded, and internal quality assured again. We recommend at your centre for the management of the project that first submissions should be received by the end of March to provide sufficient time for marking, IQA, and an opportunity for resubmission if required. When it comes to assessing a Synoptic project, it should be done holistically. You will be judging the project as a whole, and it will be assessed against each of the assessment objectives. The descriptors have been written for each assessment objective, and assessors will use the grading descriptors to determine the banding decision for each one. The students will be able to see these grading descriptors as they are on the actual brief. There are 4 bands that can be awarded: not yet achieved, band 1, band 2, and band 3. We now move on to sample portfolios. Prior to assessing, and even possibly before beginning the Synoptic project, you may find it useful to look at the sample portfolios which contain learners' work that we have available on our QualHub. On the QualHub, on the assessment materials tab, you have some example work graded at different levels. This can give you a good idea of what the different grades look like. In these documents, you will find the evidence produced by the learner, the feedback from the assessor and what their comments are, and there are also some comments from an EQA, external quality assurer, justifying why it has achieved the grade that has been awarded. When making your assessment decision, you must ensure that it's clearly identified and the band awarded is recorded for each AO, and you indicate and record what evidence is attributed to that grade. It is then clear what AOs have not been achieved. From the EQA's reviews that took place last year, I have listed some of the examples of best practice that the EQA teams have identified, and you may find useful when marking and assessing completed projects for this session. First of all, there should be a consistent approach taken to the grading of each assessment objective. And you must ensure that if you have a number of assessors assessing different cohorts, that this consistency approach is applied across the whole of the learners. So you should grade each learner as an individual, take a holistic view of the whole completed project. You must ensure that you show where you have assessed the learning work using ticks to confirm agreements with the responses that the learners have provided. You must clearly annotate the project, identifying areas of strength, offering formative feedback to confirm if the assessment objective is being covered, and detail where each AO is covered or whether it's been partially covered. This provides a clear audit trail of assessment, which indicates the internal and the external quality assurer where evidence is located for each AO. Remember to authenticate the project to confirm that it is the learner's own work. As part of the feedback, use questions, probing questions and phrases to encourage the learner to self-reflect and evaluate their own work. As an example of good practice, a number of centres last year used different coloured highlighters to identify on learners' work where assessment met a specific assessment objective. This helps provide a clear and visual image of where the evidence is located for the audit trail. We're now going to have a look at some examples of learner work and the grade that it's been awarded. So for the first task, this is a fairly basic piece of work from the learner. They've shown that what is understood by cardiovascular endurance and agility and how it can be improved. The response from the learner tends to be very basic and in the form of brief statements. There are very few examples of them confirming knowledge and understanding. In this instance, this should be graded as AO1, Band 1, where learners would recall and communicate basic knowledge and understanding from a limited range of health and fitness concepts, principles, skills, and techniques. The next piece of work on the slide tends to be a better piece of work. But for this task, learners have shown that they understand what is meant by cardiovascular endurance and agility and how it can be improved. They've shown, they've supported their evidence with lots of examples to demonstrate knowledge and understanding. If you look at about the fourth paragraph down where they've talked about regular aerobic exercise, they've used lots of examples to support and demonstrate knowledge and understanding. They've also provided a clear and detailed explanation of how it can be improved. They talked about the different type of training in the bottom paragraph. Therefore, in this instance, this could be confirmed as AO1 Band 3, where learners recalled and communicated comprehensive knowledge and understanding from a wide range of health and fitness concepts, principles, skills, and techniques. So for AO3, learners are asked to produce some fitness tests for their clients and assess them. So as you can see, it's quite a well-presented piece of work. So the good use of diagrams to support their evidence. A learner has devised appropriate tests to assess fitness levels for cardiovascular and agility. There's some clear analysis of the results and they've been correctly interpreted. In this instance, AO3, Band 3, they've been able to critically analyse and evaluate selected health and fitness data and information, systematically judging and reaching relevant and valid conclusions. But all the information and the way the presentation and the interpretation of results, we've been able to confirm this as Band 3 for the AO3. So for this bit of so learners have been asked to produce plans and session plans to help improve their clients' fitness. And this was not an easy piece of work to grade, as the learner has produced a detailed and well presented and well thought out plan. The main activity includes a range of components. Consideration is given to warm up and cool down, and from the information provided would enable the client to make the required improvements to their fitness. The reason that it's only Band 2 is that it's heavily based towards fitness, with very little reference to health considerations such as diet and lifestyle. So in this instance, it looks as though the client has provided the information through their lifestyle questionnaire, but that has not necessarily been considered by the learner in producing these sessions. So in this instance, we've thought that AO4 is Band 2. So learners have demonstrated and applied most relevant health and fitness skills and techniques by applying and using mostly appropriate health and fitness concepts and principles. So including the presentation, where learners can access some examples of PIRQ and lifestyle questionnaires. These are probably amongst the better ones that are available for download, and these can be used by the learners for guidance in producing their own. We're now going to have just provide you some information about providing feedback to the learner. I'm going to give some general guidance when giving feedback and the documentation that we have in place to support you in giving learner feedback. I'm going to provide some general guidance when giving feedback, and also give some more specific giving feedback and provide some good practice examples. Here is an example document for this that the assessors can use to give feedback to learner. The feedback, the guidance that we don't have to use our documents, but it's a recommendation. The feedback can't be overly specific and directed, so it might be best to use the grading descriptors to assist with feedback. For example, you might say something like, you have described X, but you need to explain the importance of Y. Or you have used some key terminology, but you need to use the key terminology more consistently throughout your work. There is another option available which is better suited to the Synoptic project, which is in the grading calculator. On the third sheet of the grading calculator called Learners are the 5 assessment objectives in the banding. You can copy and paste these into a different spreadsheet or Word document if you want to, and use these as the feedback. I'll show you how. You can circle or highlight the relevant banding that the learner has achieved and write your comments for each assessment objective. You don't have to use these documents. They're only suggestions and are available in course files on the QualHub within policies and documents tabs for you to use. We're now going to look at some of the best practice. This slide will highlight good practice examples that you can use to provide effective feedback to learners. Remember, feedback should be provided to learners after the project has been sampled by the IQA, and in this year's instance, in line with the adaptations. All feedback records must be maintained to review. Your EQA will ask to see feedback records as part of the EQA review. Effective feedback is developmental and constructive, providing the learner with an overview of how they performed. A good framework to use is to identify with the learner what went well, and then strengthen that by including what the learner could do to make the project or their work even better. Effective feedback should be evidence-based, picking out the points from the learner response to highlight the key areas of strength. A good starting point is to use the band descriptors to scaffold feedback. This strengthens the audit trail of assessment and starts to create a rationale for the band and grade to be awarded. So tips for effectiveness on WWB and EBI and using SMART. Examples from master projects are also on the QualHub. Don't be afraid to use probing questions to extend learner response. And as part of any kind of feedback, ensure that you maintain records of resubmissions. Once again, your EQA will ask to see these. And it also asks to see examples of both formative and summative feedback. So going back to the first slide, here are some examples of feedback. It's some good use of annotation on here. So they've identified what information they've used, and but they've also stated that the description is fairly basic, so the learners clearly being given information that they've not always provided sufficient detail. They've also used a good use of probing questions, including how will this support your fitness, and how do these activities support the changes that change occur. So they're identifying to the learner what level they're at, and also get them to think about how they could improve the work. And I'll hand over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Phil. That was really informative. So now I'd like to talk you through the internal quality assurance, or the IQA process. Phil will then come back on and explain some of the things that you can consider when you complete the IQA process that will make it easier and more effective. The internal quality assurance stage is the final check of the Synoptic project within the centre. The internal quality assurer should be able to correctly assess and moderate the work, so therefore they do need to be knowledgeable on the content, competent on the grading system so they can challenge any grading decisions, and not have been involved with the teaching of the learners. If this is the first year of delivery, then we do recommend the IQA sample to be 50% of the learner cohort. The sample should contain a wide range of learners, grades, assessors, and satellite centres if applicable. After the first year, the sampling size can be reduced. And while there is no specific number on the size of the sample, it should still be large enough to give the IQA a picture of the work that has been completed by the learner. So we would recommend between a 20 and 40% sample. Grades can be given to the learners after this IQA has been completed, but you should inform them that this may be changed based on the EQA's review. Under normal circumstances, no feedback would be given to the learners at this stage, and the feedback should be directed to the assessor. And in a normal year, those grades would usually need to be submitted to us by the 31st of March each year. Your EQA would then sample the work and the assessment decision, and then would either agree and bank the grades or reject them. Your EQA would then discuss their findings, give you a supportive action plan, and the new grades would be banked for those learners once the supportive action plan had been completed. Following an EQA review, then, you can give your learners feedback, and they would be entitled to one resubmission. Learners are usually to use the same Synoptic project. They would have another 21 hours in supervised sessions, and the work would then be assessed and internally quality assured again. And the resubmission grade then would normally be with us by the 31st of May, when it's a business as usual academic session. And there is a process when it is BAU, like I said, but there are adaptations in place for this session, and I will go into a little bit more detail later in the webinar, where I will talk you through the resubmission process, but in particular for this year. To determine the grade achieved for the Synoptic project, you can use the grading calculator on QualHub. On the grading calculator, there is a place to put the learner's exam grade so that you can determine their overall grade for the technical award. If you don't know their exact UMS, but think you know what grade they will obtain based on mock exams and other predictions, then you can place that in the provisional grade column. If they've sat their actual external assessment, then you can put their actual UMS score in the actual exam grade column. If you use the provisional exam grade column, then the calculator will give you the maximum and minimum estimated grades that the learners would get. If you've used their actual assessment grade, then it will calculate their estimated actual overall grade for the level 1-2 technical award. You can also place the band achieved by each learner against each assessment objective. This will then calculate the grade achieved for the Synoptic project. And with this example on this slide, you can see that learner A achieved bands 2, 2, 2, 1 and a 2, giving them an overall grade of a level 1 distinction. Whereas learner B got band 2s for every assessment objective, and they got a level 2 merit overall. That is the only assessment objective that Learner B did better on, but as you can see, they jumped up 2 grades. And this shows just how important assessment objective 4 is in terms of its heavier weighting. On QualHub, in policies and documents, you'll find course file documents. Your EQA may recommend that you create a course file to contain all the relevant documentation evidence that you'll need when they conduct the review. The documents and guidance on this page will show you what kinds of things you could include in a course file. Please note though that this is only for guidance. It isn't mandatory that you include everything that's included in there. You may wish to adapt some of the documents to fit in with your centre's own way of working. And this is intended to demonstrate what basic documents could be included in the course file and what your EQAs would look for to ensure that you have appropriate arrangements in place to deliver and assess our qualifications effectively. It may be that you have other documents depending on your internal processes in your centre and the qualifications you're delivering. And within the course file documents, you will also find IQA documentation, including a sampling plan template and an IQA feedback to assessor example, to name but a few. I'm now briefly going to hand back to Phil, who's going to provide you with some information on things to consider when conducting IQA.
Thanks, Kelly. You must think of the internal quality assurer as your critical friend, and their key role is to support and offer advice and guidance to the assessors in the centre. The feedback provided by the IQA is to be directed to the assessor and not the learner. It's to support the assessment process and is not a second marking of the work. You should have, as a centre, have an IQA sampling plan and strategy which outlines the IQA activities and how it will be undertaken and completed over the 21-22 session. I would strongly recommend that as part of the IQA sampling plan, you sample the full grade profile to ensure the consistency of assessments and decisions across the whole cohort. You also need to ensure that all assessors who are assessing the project form part of that plan and their work is checked for accuracy of assessment decisions. So, for example, if learners have achieved L2P, L2M, L2 grade, D grades, you must ensure that your sample includes all the grades that have been achieved. It should be consideration when providing feedback as the IQA is what went well with the assessment process and how the assessment can be improved even better for next time. I'll now hand you back to Kelly and talk you through the resubmission process.
Thanks, Phil. So as Phil said, I am now going to talk you through the resubmission process for this session. And then Phil again will come back on to explain some examples of good practice for this process. So as I explained at the start of this webinar, there are adaptations in place for this academic session. And whilst IQA must still be undertaken in line with our approach to awarding an assessment, the adaptations confirm that resubmissions should be managed internally within the centre and assessment and IQA records should be kept up to date to provide a full audit trail of the resubmission. And the first submission grade are not to be entered onto the portal. Once learners have been given their feedback, they are permitted to one resubmission opportunity for their Synoptic project, if applicable to that learner. In this session though, learners are still to use the same Synoptic project, so they don't have to start from scratch. They can add or make changes to their previous work, but they are permitted unlimited hours to complete their resubmission. The learner can also use the feedback that they have been given to make improvements. Once the learners have completed their work, it will be assessed again, an internal quality assurance check carried out, and then a second external quality assurance review arranged. It is essentially the same procedure as the first submission explained on the previous slide. So in summary, for this academic session, learners are to complete the Synoptic project, and we have removed the requirement to complete it within a set number of hours. When completed, the assessor will mark it against the grading descriptors and fill in the grading calculator. The IQA will then check the work and provide feedback to the assessor. Learners are given their feedback and are permitted a resubmission opportunity, but this again, as stated, will be managed internally by the centre. And as Phil did state, we do recommend or suggest that you use the end of March as a first submission deadline. Grades for the learner's first submission do not need to be entered onto the portal, but assessment records should be kept up to date to provide that full audit trail. The final resubmission grades are to be submitted to the portal by the 27th of May 2022, and the EQA review deadline must be conducted before the 31st of July 2022. The EQA will then check the work and either agree with the grading decision or reject the grading decisions. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you. Now I'm going to give you some examples of best practice that will help you with the resubmission process. You must ensure that you maintain tracker and assessment records to evidence first and final submission. There must be clarity on that tracker record, what is a first and what is a final submission, including the dates when each have taken place. When using resubmissions, you must ensure that you complete the assessment cycle again, so that includes feedback from the assessor, awarding of the grades, and that the IQA must be fully involved in the process as they would have been in the first submission. The IQA must once again provide additional feedback to the assessor on the assessment practice and confirm if they agree with the new grade that's been awarded. If they do not agree, then you should decide and provide standardisation and clarity of what the grade would be before you would enter it onto the portal. The IQA must ensure that they maintain IQA logs to evidence decision made and discussions, standardisation meetings and general team meetings where this is discussed. Records should be kept and made available as part of any audit trail to an EQA. I'll now hand you back to Kelly.
So I'd now like to describe the process for submitting your grades to the portal, and then Phil will provide you with some best practice tips. You can submit unit grades by selecting grading and then submit unit grades from the portal menu, as shown on the slide on the screen. You can search for your learners to submit unit grades using batch, forename, surname, centre learner reference, or the NCFE learner number. Click to select the learners that you would like to submit grades for. Please note though that unit grades should only be submitted once the work has been assessed and a sample has been internally quality assured. Once this has been done, please then submit the applicable grades for each learner. The unit grades will be stored until your EQA banks them following a successful quality assurance review. Please check the information that you're going to submit is correct, as once the grades are submitted, you're unable to make any further amendments. Select the learners that you would like to submit the grades for, and then select Next. When you select a unit, you get the option to select a grade for each learner. When you have finished selecting grades, tick the declaration and complete the full name of your IQA before selecting Submit. Confirmation of successful unit grade submission will then show on your screen. I do suggest that you save or print a copy of this screen for your records. If you do require any further support, please do check out our portal support user guide on QualHub, or you can contact our customer support team on 0191 239 8000 or by email at customersupport@ncfe.org.uk. Over to you, Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So as your EQA, I'd like to offer some guidance here to make this process easier for yourselves and your centres. So learners should have the opportunity to complete submissions. This will be managed internally by you, and when the learners have completed all the work and achieved their final grade, this will be entered into the portal and the EQA review can take place. So no EQA review can take place until all the grades on the portal. The EQA review will sample a cross-section of the grades achieved by your learners. So if you've got some learners at level 1 pass up to level 2 distinction, they will sample a cross-section of all those grades. So so that you know what you're going to put forward as part of the review, the EQA will select the sample from the portal, and he will let you know which learners' work they wish to sample. Sample can only be sent when the final grades are submitted by the portal, and grade profile will be sampled, and also be prepared to provide further samples. So especially if there's an issue around the grades, then the EQA will widen out the sample. I'm now going to explain EQA reviews and the support that we have available to you and your centres. The EQA process with NCFE is probably the most supportive of any AO, any other awarded organisation, and hopefully if you've gone through it before, you've had a really positive experience. And we always work hard to make sure that it fully meets the requirements of your centres. So the final stage is the external quality assurance check. On QualHub, in the delivery and learner support tab on the slide, we have a section regarding the EQA reviews, which you may want to view to help you prepare. If you've already registered your learners, you should have been assigned your external quality assurer. In our area, if you haven't received an external quality assurer, please use the emails on this webinar to ask who your EQA is, and we'll soon sort that out for you. You're entitled to 2 free reviews or visits from your EQA, and it is worth contacting them now so that you can arrange your visit, as many will be started to get booked up appointments already. All the data indicates that anybody who's requested the controlled assessment stroke Synoptic project have already booked their visit date. So if you haven't, please, or you haven't been in contact with the EQA, please try your best to make that kind of contact. For this year, we're now back in visits. I actually did a visit yesterday in person, which was really exciting, although still lots of our reviews can be remote. So we can sort that out to suit your needs. So if you feel as if you want a face-to-face review, you can request that with your EQA, or if you prefer it to be remote and it's managed time effectively, that's fine. All EQAs who work on these qualifications from the sport always provide feedback and discussion at the end of the review on Teams. So even though you might not get that face-to-face, that you can still have easy access to your EQA. Some of the key things that your EQA will be checking is they'll be looking at your internal quality assurance process, a sample of portfolios to check assessment decisions. They may want to check a scheme of work as well. And it also covers some of the wider aspects such as your policies, CV, and CPDs. In terms of the Synoptic project though, the IQA process and assessment decisions will be the most important. So some of the key elements is you will also need to have all learner work available for the EQA check. So once they've gone through the sampling process, reviewed all the work, looked at all the evidence, they will either agree with your assessment decisions and the grades submitted will be banked. Or you might have potentially the situation where they don't necessarily agree with the grades and they will reject the grades. This can become either way. This could be through assessing too harshly, so where you've not given the learner where the grades there should be, or too leniently where the grade is too high and the EQA doesn't agree. Whichever way the outcome is, the EQA will have a full and detailed discussion with you, gives you some actions via a very supportive action plan, which will be included in your report, and then the new grades will be banked for those learners. grades are changed by the EQA, that does not affect the learner's capacity to resubmit. After the EQA, feedback can be given to your learners, and they are entitled to one resubmission. So for this academic year, 2021, the EQA will be only looking at final submissions in this section, because you should have managed internally the resub. So if we're looking at final work, there would also take into consideration any resubmissions which have been made. EQA review this year will take place when you have submitted final grades. Final grades, as indicated earlier in the presentation, must be submitted by the NCFE portal no later than the 27th of May. As indicated earlier, learners have the opportunity to complete resubmissions, and this will be managed internally by you. And when the learners have completed all work and achieved their final grade, this will be entered in the portal, and that is when your EQA will take place. EQA will sample a cross-section of the grades, but you must also remember that EQA support is available throughout the year. It's not just at the time of the work. So all UKs in the health and fitness quality assure on the health and fitness qualifications are always available to answer any queries you may have, and you should have their email on the allocation. The time of the review is that all reviews should be completed by 31st of July 22. The sample, so just to repeat some of the things that the key elements before. The sample we clearly sent to you before the review. Sample can only be sent when final grades are submitted on the portal. The grade profile will be sampled. Always be prepared, and always remember the support mechanisms that are in place to help you. Now look at some best practice. You can go on download on the portal if you had a review last year, you'll be able to download your EQA report from the previous session. And you can do this by search for visit report by selecting search then visit report. And you can review all your centre's visit reports by selecting all in the visit type. Alternatively, you can refine your search by selecting a visit type from the list available, or by entering a specific product code, product name, session and/or visit date. Also available here is the name and the contact details of your EQA. It's a really good practice that if you review your EQA report from previous sessions. This is always a starting point for an EQA when he is undertaking a review. He will look to see what progress you've made against the actions and recommendations that were on your last report. You can do this by viewing section 9, which will detail any actions or recommendations set in sections 3, 4, 5, or 6 of the report. Always remember, recommendations are something that you need to take into consideration. That's so in terms of an EQA might identify something that would help you develop the course or make the required improvements, but recommendations are just suggestions for you to consider, and some are therefore optional, although we do encourage centres to respond to them, whereas an action is something that would be mandatory, and we would recommend, and we would highly encourage you to implement these. So any actions that aren't addressed from the previous review, we then tend to repeat them so that they become part of the next review. After an EQA review has taken place, you will receive an EQA report, which will be a formal document of the outcome of the review. what should happen is when you have your team score from your EQA, he will discuss what's in the report, so that when you actually receive the report, there is nothing in there that's not been either discussed with you or pointed out to you. I'll now hand you back to Kelly.
Thanks, Phil. So lastly, I'm now going to talk you through the best bit, which is certifying your learners and how you can claim your learner certificates on the portal. Now that the Synoptic project has been completed, learners will eagerly be waiting for their certificates, and certificates can be claimed when they have taken and achieved a grade for the external assessment and they have a bank grade for their Synoptic project. For 2021-22, the EQA review deadline, as we've said, is before the 31st of July 2022, and this is again to allow results to be confirmed by the end of July for performance tables. The portal user guide also contains details on submitting grades, viewing results and certification, which is what I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail on the next slide. You can make a certificate claim for your learners by selecting certification from the portal menu and clicking the Make a Claim option. Alternatively, you can also select the Claim My Certificates option from the portal homepage. You will then be taken to the results search page. Here you can search for your learners by batch number, product code, product name, forename, surname or date of birth. If you do require further options, do select Advanced, and options to search on Centre's learner number, NCFE learner number, etc. will become available. You can search on one or more of these options, and your search results will then show. Then you select the learners that you would like to claim certificates for and click Submit. When claiming certificates for these VCert qualifications, your selected learners will show. Your learners will be displayed with a new claim status. This is automatically calculated and will show as either a full or partial, depending on which units have had grades banked for them. The grade is the overall grade that the learner has achieved enough units for a full certificate. If you select a learner, you can see the grades for each unit that has been banked. If you don't wish to claim for a learner at this time, you can remove them from the claim by selecting the Remove Learner from the Claim icon. You must confirm the address that you would like the certificates sending to and then select Claim. To note if you would like a purchase order number to show on any certification orders, then you can also complete this here. You then review your claim before it's finalised, and it is worth checking that you have claimed all the units that the learner has achieved and the expected status is showing correctly. You can view the claimed units by selecting Learner Units. If you need to make any amendments, select Return to Claim before proceeding. Otherwise, you can select Claim Certificates to submit your claim. So we have now reached the end of this webinar. If you do have any questions based on the information that both myself and Phil have delivered today, then please don't hesitate to contact me directly on kellyjohnson@ncfe.org.uk. And if I'm unavailable, our general email is provider.development@ncfe.org.uk. And please do visit our VCert webpage on our website. Also, it may be worth remembering and reminding you that if your learners are registered, then you will have been allocated an EQA, so please do contact your EQA for further support. Lastly, I've included some of the useful links that I've referred to throughout this webinar today, so if you do require any further information and support, please do take a look at these links. These links do include our approach to awarding assessment, the adaptation blueprint, and the quality assurance policy. So at this point, I would just like to say a big thanks to Phil's support with this webinar. It has been invaluable. And thanks everyone for listening. And on behalf of everyone here at NCFE, we wish you a safe and successful year.